So we are lucky to have Cilla Benko here from Swedish Radio. Cilla, I know Swedish Radio was part of the founders of this beautiful project that Radiodays is. What do you see as a development?
Well, it's completely different today. It's so much bigger, basically. I mean, when we started it off, which is very many years ago, it was mainly commercial radio and public service radio, not so much more. Now we have all the audio players that are sort of part of a global digital market. It's gone all over the world, more or less now, at least all over Europe, but it also has a branch in the US and a branch in Asia. So it's a completely different story, which is great because that proves to everybody that the world is not only about video, it's very, very much about audio at the same time.
Absolutely, and everyone here is trying to answer this question. What's the future of audio? What would be your take on this?
Well, I spoke some years ago about something that I already then called the split, which means that we have to be able to do a lot of things at the same time. Our core business is still doing fine, which is old traditional linear radio, but it can't stay old. We have to develop it because, of course, if you compete with basically everything in a smartphone, it's a different world than in an ordinary analog radio receiver. But we should really take care of something that I call our spine, which is the linear radio stations. But at the same time, of course, you need to have other offerings like on-demand. Podcasts, for instance, have been for years now, 20 years, very successful. So the crucial thing, I think, also in the future is how do you keep the linear radio stations still attractive in a totally different environment with a much higher competition, especially among young audiences, but also what's the next step for on-demand? I mean, we have tried podcasts now for a very long time, but I think we have also to find another format, another new on-demand format. And I'm very curious to see what that's going to be.
So you think we have to dialogue with streaming as well?
Well, not necessarily streaming, but I mean, we all have our own players, I guess, more or less, and we have to make sure that in a world that is digital, that we get the audience to be digital together with us, primarily on our own platforms, and that is offering linear radio, but in a new way, a developed linear radio that is much, much more live, and also to keep on nourishing our podcasts, make them more attractive, find new formats, find new themes, new genres maybe, but also think about the interaction between the on-demand and the linear live. How can we get them to interact with each other to make it even more attractive to turn on a broadcaster's player instead of going to the big global streaming platforms?
In your presentation, you said something that that got an ovation. You know, everybody clapped to that, and it was that you said you wouldn't feel comfortable if you wouldn't speak out for the things that you have been seeing in the radio panorama or even in the journalistic panorama that possibly aren't working out. And you said that there's more than 100 journalists died in Palestine this year, and you said those are your eyes and ears there, so we should be concerned about that. What would you say about this?
Well, I think a very troublesome trend, and that is that people that want to keep unbiased media out from a war zone are successful in doing that, and I think Gaza is a very sort of true example on that, where Netanyahu basically have forbidden international media to be able to enter into Gaza, and therefore the Palestinian journalists on the ground that are now being killed massively are the eyes and ears of everybody, because otherwise we wouldn't get any coverage out of Gaza. So that is very, very troublesome. And prior, if we now talk 30 years ago, journalists were entitled to be in the war zone, to be there scrutinizing the power, looking at what was going on, reporting home in an unbiased way. And if they are locked out from more and more places around the world, the information will be in the hands of those who are in power, and that is a problem if you are sort of nurturing well-functioning democracies. And the other thing I see is that we have a world that is basically in turmoil. We don't even know if the world that we have known since 1945, the Transatlantic Treaty, is going to survive. and we have a president in a very big country already, when he was president the last time, calling media and journalists enemy of the state. Of course, that is a huge problem, and we as media companies have to stand up for our profession and do everything we can to be relevant to the public, because if we can keep the public, that's the way of going forward.
And you see different representatives from different media companies coming here to Radio Days. What do you think you'll take back home from Radio Days?
Well, I think all the good conversations and all the spirit that's here. When we started Radio Days, which is, as I said in the beginning, very many years ago, people were really feeling that maybe they were part of a dying media, that everything in the future was going to be about video and text and not so much about audio. And what we have seen over the last 2-3 years is that everybody's doing audio, also the newspapers. They do their own podcasts. So I think that people today feel that they are part of the most interesting media going into the future, that audios really have a very, very promising future in front of them. So I think we will have a lot of really inspiring conversations, I think.
Very promising future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.